Okay, before we start, just short remarks. How will we make this communication coverage of this conference? It will be broadcasted on the most popular web news page in Lithuania. And oh, super.
We may start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Those who are present here and those who are tuned on through various channels. Today, the Committee on Environment of the Seimas, together with Timber Production Cluster, is launching a conference which is titled The European Green Deal, Lithuania's Prospects of Becoming the Global Production and Export Center of Prefabricated Buildings. I will give the floor then to the European Commissioner to speak. Actually, Europe is looking for ways to mitigate environmental impacts, how to live in more sustainable cities, and how to reform our industry so that it is cost efficient and clean. Transformation in constructions is one of the areas. It is very often very slow. It lags behind other sectors. But today it is time to speak about new opportunities. We have over 1,000 people in Lithuania working in constructions. Timber construction sectors and timber sectors is one of the most productive sectors in terms of export in Lithuania. So I believe that we need to pool our efforts together with the European Commission, to pool the efforts of different cities, to pool the efforts with scientists and design bureaus and centers. Today, our aim is to discuss European tendencies that we have to take into consideration. Thank you very much for joining us in this conference. I thank Mr. Gentvilas. I'm Paulius Milčius. I'm a consultant at the Timber Production Cluster. This is an innovative cluster. I will quote architect Arnoldas Gabrienas, who once said that once sustainability was a very inconvenient friend who would drop into a party and you would have to force yourself to speak to this guest. And it seems that today the Green Deal is not the inconvenient friend, but actually the host of the party. As the president of the European Commission says that 40% of our greenhouse gases are produced by our construction sector. We have here with us Mr. Virginijus Sinkevičius. He is the European Commissioner from Lithuania who is responsible for environment, oceans, and fishery. He works hand in hand together with Mr. Timmermans from the Netherlands, so that the European Green Deal gives a new impetus not only in fighting climate change, but also in addressing other challenges, other economic challenges in our country. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Virginijus Sinkevičius. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak in English. As I understand, we have many international guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, thank you for this invitation to address you today. I'm always more than happy to talk about the European Green Deal. I think it's the best thing that has happened to Europe in quite a long time. And of course, I'm especially happy to talk about it in the country I know best. Lithuania has many opportunities to make the best of the Green Deal in forestry and elsewhere. And it's very important to make the most of them. When the Green Deal was announced, some people were afraid of this new focus on sustainability. But 1 year later, most of them seem to see the deal for what it really is, a logical, coherent strategy for growth and jobs, a strategy for long-term sustainability with a concern for citizens' well-being at its heart. A lot has happened, of course, since we adopted the Green Deal. When the pandemic first hit, Europe faced a recession. The initial recovery was quite good, but the second wave is still taking a heavy toll. At the Commission, we see growth returning in 2021, but we think it will take at least 2 years for the EU economy to return to previous levels. The Green Deal will continue to play a central role, leading the way to a recovery that is rapid, sustainable, and just, leaving no one behind. The reason we are so confident about the deal is because it takes a systemic approach. It's a map towards a unified whole with many elements pulling in the same direction. And when you put them together, you see the path towards a clean, circular, and climate neutral economy. It's a path that can reinvigorate industry, creating new employment opportunities and benefits for local communities. The circular economy in particular will sustain this recovery. The more circularity we create, the greater our resilience is. But it does mean significant change, a new drive to change the way we produce and consume. That's why the Commission adopted a new circular economy action plan earlier this year. It contains initiatives from the entire life cycle of products, from design, manufacturing to consumption, repair, reuse, recycling, and bringing resources back into the economy. It's a plan that targets the economic sectors where circularity has the most to offer. In 2021, the Commission will present proposals for 7 areas with a high potential for circularity. Construction, of course, is one of those sectors. And I'm sure you are aware of the scale. Buildings and construction represent 18 million direct jobs, about 9% of EU GDP. It means half of our extracted material, half of our energy consumption, a third of the water use, and a third of all our waste. So clearly, only from these numbers, you can see that the potential for circularity is huge. We are not the only ones to say this. Earlier this year, the UN Internal Resource Panel and the European Environment Agency made construction a focus of their studies. And they concluded that more circularity could bring savings of 60 to 80% in terms of embodied environmental impacts. In other words, we could massively shrink its footprint. We need to take these findings very seriously because embodied carbon in buildings accounts for some 10% of all our emissions. In practice, if we want to go carbon neutral, then we need to do much more and to achieve much more circularity in the sector. That's a challenge. But it's also a chance to modernize, making the industry more digital, reducing its impact and creating, of course, high quality jobs. Europe will be there to support the change with the Recovery and Resilience Facility and other funds supporting the rollout of sustainable construction. Another Green Deal deliverable, the renovation wave, is also providing a framework for increased construction activity. The aim is to renovate 35 million building units over the coming decade and creating 160,000 extra jobs in the process. We also have a new tool to facilitate the process. It's called Levels and brings together expertise from many areas. The idea is to use a set of indicators that assess and report on sustainability performance of buildings across their life cycle. It's easy to use, it's ready and waiting. It can be rolled out in all parts of the sector to encourage the transformation, and it fits very well with national standards and requirements. My services are already using Levels to develop new green public procurement criteria for buildings, looking at the full life cycle of building with the accent on increased circularity. And I hope to see Levels become part of construction sector DNA, a reference point across the whole European Union. But let's get back a little bit closer to Lithuania. So what does this transformation mean in practice for buildings and forest sector in Lithuania? First of all, I see a number of opportunities. To make them happen, you need good planning. A number of countries in Europe are already moving to develop their own roadmaps and to include circularity requirements and whole life carbon declarations in building regulations and public procurement. That can act as a powerful catalyst. It can set the sector in motion as organizations become aware of their impact. Not only their impact on the environment, but also the impact their actions can have, driving a wider process of change. And in that process, a wood-based circular bioeconomy can begin to take off. You can use bio-based products to substitute fossil-based ones, lowering emissions of greenhouse gases and other pollutants. And when you use wood or woody biomass in an efficient and innovative manner, it's a springboard for numerous activities. There are many opportunities: innovative wooden construction, engineered wood products, panels, and furniture. You can upcycle, recycle paper to make insulation foams. You can use secondary raw materials to get away from fossil-based products and use forest-based ones instead of adhesives, packaging, biochemicals, and so on. The opportunities are there. And now it's time to act. It's a chance to sharpen the competitive edge of Lithuanian industry and make the choices that people want, the choices that will look even better to future generations. As the focus is very much on wood today, I need to sound a note of caution. We all understand the importance of forests. They clean the air we breathe, they provide space for recreation, they are heaven for biodiversity, and for the economy, they are an essential resource. But across the EU, the condition of forests is poor. This summer, the European Environment Agency published a major report, The State of Nature, and the news was very bad. Only 22% of the forest habitats reported under the Birds and Habitats directives are in favorable condition, less than a quarter. Harvest intensity has been rising since 2015. They are suffering from drought, from pests, and from wildfires. But forests too are part of the Green Deal. And the Commission is committed to increasing the quality and the quantity of European forests. We set out many of the details in the new strategy for biodiversity. We are committed to defining, mapping, monitoring, and strictly protecting all the EU's remaining primary and old growth forests. The quantity of forests should increase and its health and resilience should improve. And we are about to take things further with a new EU forest strategy to be proposed in spring. It will build on the actions and commitments in the biodiversity strategy, and it will be fully in line with the wider climate neutrality ambitions of the Green Deal. The aim is to set out the policy framework we need to deliver the forests we want in the future. It will cover the whole forest cycle, and the focus will be on effective afforestation, forest preservation, and restoration. In parallel, we are developing a roadmap to plant 3 billion trees in line with ecological principles. Taken as a whole, the strategy should inform EU policies relevant to forests and the sector, and it will ensure a consistent approach, harmonizing our domestic policies with our commitments on the international stage. Coming back to the forest economy, I have 3 thoughts to finish with. First of all, the importance of working together. The future is all about combination, bringing in skills from other disciplines and using them to build something new. That's the thinking behind the new European Bauhaus movement, announcing the renovation wave. It's about combining the best science, technologies, art, and culture with high societal and economic value. And I really hope to see Lithuania play an important role there. Similarly, the circular economy is all about collaboration. In a circular economy, we work together in a more intelligent manner, looking for the common gains and mutual interests that help the economy grow in a manner that's sustainably productive. Secondly, whenever we talk about circularity, we are talking about better design. Design for climate neutrality, adaptability and comfort in our living and working environment. Up to 80% of a product's footprint over its lifetime is determined during this phase. And we need to concentrate more resources in this area, because with good design, you really can lead the world. And thirdly, don't neglect the available funds. The EU is supporting this green growth agenda with more resources than ever before. When we put together the EU budget and the recovery effort under the Next Generation EU, we have a package of over 1.8 trillion euros, the largest budget by far in the history of the EU. My advice is one: make good use of the funds that will be made available. You can spend them and invest them only once. They are designed to support sustainable construction and renovation in the green and digital transition. And of course, I hope to see Lithuania use them to the full. A circular forest-based bioeconomy would be an excellent investment for the future. The Lithuanian wood sector is in a great position to take advantage of this moment. So don't miss out. The opportunity is there for taking. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you, of course, a fruitful further discussions.
Labai ačiū.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Sinkevičius. I would like to inform you that if you have any questions to the speakers, please write them on the channel of on the online channel of broadcasting, whether in English or in Lithuanian, and we will try to answer them later on. Speaking about climate mitigation, some experts say that climate mitigation is not the only step. Experts stress that in order to stop climate change, construction can restore and lock CO2. The Finnish Institute says that half of the emissions of the concrete buildings could be locked by the timber production, timber buildings. Mr. Hubert Romberg is from the Romberg Group. He is the founder of the wooden constructions. He will speak about the future of constructions and its relation to sustainability. So the floor is yours, Mr. Romberg.
I did not really understand what you said, so I'm not sure if I should start now. So if that's the case, thank you very much for having me for this very important session. I think this is a very, very important moment for the world. I mean, for Europe, as the Commissioner says, and I'm really happy to share some thoughts with you on what I see the possibilities are, where technology already is, and probably what the best way for European member states is to utilize that. So I will change to my presentation, and I want to talk about how I see the future of a construction which is greener, which is more resource efficient and more sustainable. So, as we heard, we have three.
Sorry, Mr. Romberg, we can't see your presentation yet.
Okay. Can you see it?
Not yet. No, nothing.
Okay, that's bad.
Maybe should you try to share your whole screen or desktop.
Yes. Wow. Can you see it?
Not yet. Still.
Wow. This is really bad. Sorry for this. Now?
No.
Okay. I will come back.
Good. Maybe could we continue with Mr.
Yes.
Remigijus Šimašius, Mayor of Vilnius, and then just switch, please,
Yeah.
if possible. Okay? Thank you.
Yes.
Tai jums leidus trumpai.
Well, I will briefly introduce another speaker. Excuse us for the technical misunderstandings. Well, while testing, everything seems to be very fine, but then it turns out that something happens. Mr. Remigijus Šimašius is the mayor of Vilnius city. And according to the quality of livelihood, he is top 2 in Europe. Wooden constructions and wood comes back to the construction sector, so pilot projects all around Europe are very popular with larger buildings and smaller buildings, with schools and kindergartens. In Sweden, the entire district was planned, and finally experts agreed that we should speak not only about vertical expansion but also horizontal expansion. What is the vision of Vilnius? I ask our mayor, so I would like to give the floor to Mr. Šimašius. Hello, it is a pleasure to see you. It is a pleasure for me to join you in this conference. I would like to thank the committee and the cluster, and for organizers personally. I think that this is a huge opportunity for Lithuania, and it's an opportunity for the entire world too. In Lithuania, we have practical capacities that can be realized. I really believe that Vilnius can be a good playing field for innovations that we're discussing now today. Now, before starting, I would like to say that, well, I wanted to pass my greetings from Aušrinė Armonaitė, who is supporting everything what is going on. I will not speak about the objective of the Green Deal of the European Union. We know them all very well. I just want to discuss very important factors that will allow us to move forwards and the obstacles that impedes us to move forward. So those aspects are image, ambitions, regulations. These are the aspects that are very important to me. Now, starting with the image, as the mayor of Vilnius, I can remind you what Vilnius is and how it is. Vilnius was called Metropolis on the maps. It was depicted as being very large. And it had the image of modern architecture. Well, this actually is the result of natural resources that we have. We had our wood, our forests, and our timber. And certainly wooden architecture was also used due to lack of financial resources, and also people's convictions resulted in wooden architecture. Historically, Lithuanian noblemen used to be appalled at noblemen of other countries who would sleep in concrete buildings, as they would put that. We have a very rich history of wooden architecture. Today, we face the problem of the image. Today, we very often discuss the heritage of wooden architecture in Vilnius. But to put it in simpler words, it makes an impression that wooden architecture is old wooden buildings that have to be restored and need to be restored. But I think that this is a backlash for the city. In cities, we have to speak about a different image. I'm afraid that we need to work here very hard. We cannot compare ourselves to Kamala Harris, who said, I am who I am and I'm fine with it, and Vilnius cannot say that, so forth. So that is about the image. Ambition is the second factor. We need a modern approach, a new approach towards architecture and wooden architecture. It is important to speak about the positive, favorable, and inspiring environment for people. While Vilnius is actually top 2 city according to its development and progress in terms of the quality of living. And actually, according to some parameters, Vilnius was even top 1 in Europe. We need to work here as well, irrespective of our high ranks. We are fighting for people who would want to live in our cities. Yesterday, we announced 10 rules of urbanization in Vilnius. But we see that there are many red tape moments here. All the rules that we announced are very important for architecture. I will briefly mention them. We first of all evaluate the urbanistic context when we assess or try to decide whether to allow or not to allow some buildings or constructions. I think that in Vilnius we have too much of the Soviet heritage. And we would like to make Vilnius more modern. The principle is another principle is the principle of perimeter construction, so that we have normal streets and yards. We also need to take into consideration different needs and requirements of those buildings. We always stress that we move towards architectural contests. I hope that in future public buildings will be constructed only after announcing the contest and tenders. We can have different rules for tenders. We always underline the importance of sustainability of our buildings.
Esamų pastatų ir rajonų atgimimas naujai.
If we speak about conversion, this is where the wooden architecture and new materials are key. Because when we have storages in the middle of the city and speak about conversion using new modern materials is really inspiring. We are focusing on heritage objects, and our interest is also to protect the greenery. The point I have omitted is the principle that we are going to stick to unconditionally in the future is the priority for natural materials, so that as much as possible, local natural materials are used in construction sector. This is something that I constantly have on my mind, and I'm repeating it in different forums. And wood here, timber, is an extremely important constituent part in the system. So this is about the ambition, what kind of city we are going to create, and the role of the municipality is significant. The third factor I would like to say about is the price, is the cost, and the accessibility when speaking about the materials. Because what I hear often is that wooden structures are not being built because of the price, because it's costly. But to tell the truth, I don't want to go too deep into this issue, because this is the business of the whole sector. I really hope that joint forces are going to both safeguard the competitiveness and ensure the accessibility of materials in the future, as well as ensure the best possible price that will encourage people to use more wood in the future in construction. And the last point I would like to make today, as the mayor of the city and also the deputy chair of the party forming the ruling coalition, is regulation. Today we are speaking about the goals of the European Union, about the Green Deal. And in many cases we come across regulation banning wooden architecture. What we need is better norms and advanced regulation that would encourage the use of timber throughout the cycle of a building. If we look at the technical regulations of building, sometimes we can find that it is forbidden to use timber for public buildings. Or sometimes we find legal acts providing for wooden structures covered with other materials in construction, which doesn't sound reasonable at all. So this is where I'm really looking forward a prompt breakthrough, And I hope that Mr. Simonas Gentvilas, as the future Minister for Environment, cares about this. And to finish my intervention, I would like to say the following, that all of these things and the image and ambition as well as regulation are really important. And speaking about the national authorities, I believe that we all can resolve all these issues quite successfully. And I'm sure that in the future we will have success in all the possible aspects, including the environmental one. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. And now I would like to go back to the presentation of Mr. Hubert Romberg, who will focus on the future of construction and wooden structures.
Please turn on your microphone. Mr.
Can you,
Romberg.
yes.
Now we can hear you, but no, don't see.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, now it's okay. Now we can see your presentation and we can hear you. Now it seems to work perfect.
So thank you very much, and sorry for the hassle before. I don't know why it did not happen. I'd like to share with you some thoughts about how I see the possible future of a greener construction in combination with exactly what the European Union and the Green Deal is looking at, and to show a little bit what possibilities there are, what kind of technologies there are, and why we should and how we could tackle them. So if you could, I always check, you can see the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So I don't want to recall everything, but the most important thing is really with our construction industry that we have to now tackle those carbon emissions. We have to those resource circular issues and all what is related to this. So our way of construction today is not sustainable, and it's very polluting. So it's, on the other hand, totally unproductive and wasteful, because the last decades we did not improve very much in productivity in relation to other industries. So we have a very inefficient traditional project management, and we do prototyping for every building. And I'm not talking about architecture. Architecture is a very important sustainable thing. The most beautiful buildings will stay almost forever, but the way we build doesn't have to be done every time totally new. And we spend a lot of money on mistakes. So the point is the whole industry is totally fragmented and non-transparent. We have 100 involved parties at every project, and it's not very transparent, and it's not very technology and know-how sharing. So we have little economies of scale. So if we look at the biggest industry in the world, which is construction, we have alone in Europe 3 million contractors. And the top 250 construction companies don't even make that much of the whole volume. And the average construction company has 25 employees. Just to imagine, how can we transform an industry with different technology, which is so fragmented? And one of the biggest issues we have is qualified labor force. We lost the last 5 years, we lost 20% of all labor forces. And that's gonna stay with us, and this is a huge issue. If we work on productivity, we have to change the way we build, and that all together, we have to go in a way to decarbonize the whole industry. And putting all those things together, we addressed it with a total new approach of thinking. Putting together experience of the last decades. New evolving technologies now, like digitization, a new approach into finance, like green finance. So what we said is, to tackle polluting and the sustainability issue, we build sustainable timber hybrid buildings, which we are able to build up to 100 meters. We can go into total different urban developments with that. So we have a different ecological footprint with wood as the focus component and saving so much resources as a carbon capture technology. So on the other hand, it's very healthy. You have different well-being effects of the whole building and the life cycle perspective, because we are able to exchange material to be have many variations during the usage of time. So to tackle the unproductive and wasteful issue, we go into efficient modular and prefabrication. That means to shift work from offsite, from on-site to off-site, where we can use different ways, environments to work. We can work with different people. We can integrate more female workers. So it's a total different way of build things. And we see construction as a service in a workflow which really follows from the digital twin with the BIM models and BIM concept up to the operation of the building. So that's, I think, one of the major steps we did the last couple of years is that we have, like in other industries, a digital twin. In that digital twin, you can see every part, every kind of material. You know exactly when does it has to be where, and that gives all the data we need to make it very efficient. Then we use it as a scalable platform to get rid of all this non-transparent, fragmented prototyping. We put all the know-how we have on a platform, so everyone can use that. We can learn from best practice. You have different collaborative networks, so we don't throw away all the experience of one building. So this is very, very important. So that's a different way how buildings can be designed and built. On the left side, you see the new headquarters of Vattenfall in Berlin. It's a wood hybrid structure, the new headquarters. On the right side, you see like residential buildings with green facades, and all is done with wood in prefab as a carbon storage technology. And what we want to do is, with our pre-buildings concept, is we form a global community which follows some principle. And one is just a smart design. We go away from prototyping to standardization. We reduce the carbon with renewable resources. And with the digital twin, we can pre-check all the bugs you normally have on the site, and you get a systemic building concept. And you can apply any supplier, any type of parts. So the second thing is using technology. That means having the digital twin, you know exactly the whole carbon footprint, the global warming potential, whatever the building is made of. And on the right side, we use AI-based analytics and optimization of life cycle costs versus investment costs versus energy investments. So this is very, very important to find the right solutions. And that means creating truly sustainable buildings at the end, which are really easy to measure. That's very important, because now with the green, with the EU taxonomy, with the Green Deal, with all that spending and looking for green investments, pulling out of carbon and fossil industry, you have to have a reliable and easy concept of how to realize what are good green buildings, what is the right way to go. And like you know it from car or refrigerators, we're working on a certificate which is called ReScore, and there you have just those three things: the climate score, the energy score, and the material score, and you know exactly where you are in that measurement and how you can pose your investment. This is very, very important, and is helping very much in the taxonomy movement. Just for one example, we're doing with that concept, the new Siemens campus in Erlangen, and we had just with one project, with one building, we could save 12,800 tons of carbon just by applying very simple elements of design and structure. So, but we're not a construction company. We are a kind of a movement, a collective where we collect all the know-how and share it. And so we have from the financing this to the operation, from the green funds to the producers. we can implement all the capability and know-how from European companies in different countries to put it in the same platform concept, and building even marketplaces where you really know how can I get reliable, sustainable products which work, because at the end you have to have a building which meets all the necessities and the coding and stuff. So that's what we do, is we attract new partners in different countries, inside, outside of Europe, and that's how we call the network effect. We're growing with experience and learning much, much faster. There are so many companies now working on green buildings, green technology, but the learning cycle is too long for a building to develop technology, to get it approved, to build it, to learn and use it for the next building. It takes you years. That's too long. You know, we don't have time. That's why we're so fast, by bringing many together, learning faster, the same time. I think there are three main pillars which are important for our whole industry, for the countries of the European Union to use this really huge chance possible with the Green Deal and recovery funds investments. So there are three main pillars. One is sustainability, that we create really sustainable buildings which are carbon neutral, resource efficient, because we don't have time. We have to tackle the planetary challenges the next 15, 20 years. Otherwise, it's too late. So we have to be fast. Whatever we do, it has to be sustainable. The second is trust. We have to trust each other. We have to trust between companies, between countries. You know, it's not, physics are the same in Lithuania than in Vienna. For instance, in Vienna, you can build 84 meters out of a wooden structure, high-rise buildings, because the codes allow it, because we proved everything. So why wouldn't Lithuania trust Austria? Why don't we trust each other with the best technology? This is the most important thing for me, because it could bring Europe to the leader of the world in terms of new technology, the sustainable technology. So what I propose is make code-free zones, try to accept other countries, other technologies, prove it, and then say if it's sustainable, if it's a sharing technology that others can learn, just do it in your country and you will attract innovation. Okay, whatever country starts with that will attract all the innovation of the construction, will go there to show what's possible. And that's the third thing, is sharing. When we share what we know, then we're so fast, because we have many projects, many things are tried at the same time, and it pays into the same message. So my message here is, I show some buildings that you see what is possible, different architecture by using that type of collective intelligence. Here we have this type of buildings. Here we have the LCT1, which is built in, oh, sorry. I have to, the sound is a problem here. Which we built in 8 days with 5 people. And this is a craftsman house we built in 6 weeks. Like, you know, in 6 weeks, the people could move in. This in 6.5 weeks. So this is the huge building in Berlin. So whatever, this is the Siemens building, different countries, different companies, different codes. And it's although using the same know-how laying behind, which is driven by sustainability. And I want to finish with that. You don't have to invent everything new, but probably you just have to do things a little bit different. You know, this guy is just changing the technology, you know, he's just thinking differently about how to do things. And I want to finish my my talk to with an call to action. You know, we don't have time. We should in Europe support the implementation of existing technology, not just developing new technology. We should support the sharing of European know-how between the member states and therefore make Europe technology and mindset leader for a greener world. That's something we can do better than the United States. We can do better than China. We can start working together, sharing what we know, because no one knows more than united Europe together. And I think that's, for me, the driving force. And I'm really happy that I had the chance to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Labai ačiū ponui Romergui už tikrai įkvepiantį pranešimą.
Thank you, Mr. Romerg, for the inspiring presentation. And at least I believe that Lithuania is able to take that challenge, especially having in mind that on the one hand, we don't have so deep traditions in wooden architecture like in Austria. However, this does give us a chance to integrate different experiences from West and East Europe, and this is where our competitive advantages may show up, may be used. We do have capabilities. Europe is growing older, and the shortage of housing is also increasing. Many presenters have already mentioned that. However, how the building industry should transform, I would like to invite Mr. Gernot Strube from McKinsey company that is well known for its deep analysis in the building sector, who will speak about the new reality in immovable construction.
Taip, galim girdėti, galim matyti.
Very good. And let me share my presentation here. You see the presentation?
Kol kas ne. Dabar taip. Now we can see. Thank you. It's okay.
Very good. Very good. So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me as a guest speaker. I think I would like to really build on what has been said. I think all the trends, the situation has been well described. So I would like to a bit share broader what we see. You know, McKinsey & Company, I'm actually the global leader of the capital excellence practice. And when we say capital excellence, we talk about anything that has to do with the large ecosystem of construction, as Mr. Romberg has already lined out. And that means we're talking about all asset classes, real estate, infrastructure, and industrial assets, even though real estate makes up about 60% globally of the construction sector. We also focus on the entire chain. That means we talk to obviously investors, owners, both public and private, construction companies, engineering companies, and material suppliers, etc. So what we do is both provide thought leadership, meaning we consolidate and synthesize and do research actually on where things are going in the industry, but it's very much grounded in our work with the players in the industry. And as a leader of our practice, I personally had the chance to speak to almost 400 executives over the last couple of years in the industry. And I'd like to share some of the thoughts on that. I also want to acknowledge that we are participating in several efforts to drive the industry forward. For example, I'm a member of the advisory board of an initiative by the European Union called DigiPlace, which is framing the digital framework for construction for the European Union to get a bit more standardization into this world and avoid the fragmentation that we currently have. So allow me to share a couple of insights from the research we have done. And we already talked about the productivity. I think that in construction, once was a leader in the world for innovation. And today, it is really very much lagging behind. When you look at the productivity growth of different sectors, you know, agriculture is just an astounding factor of 1,500. But even manufacturing or retail have improved productivity by a factor of 760 or 700. And construction has more or less stayed the same in productivity. So we need to urgently change that. But it's not only the productivity imperative. So what we have done in June, we published a report that I think many of you have probably read, The Next Normal in Construction. Because the construction world is actually quite complex, we try to synthesize what is changing and where it's going. So with a busy chart, I would like to just highlight there are changes in our markets. Customers are putting increasing pressure on the delivery. The needs are changing. We live differently today than we have lived in the past. There are shifts in construction inputs. What we mean by that, for example, is a lack of skilled labor. We're losing labor force. Market regulations, codes is one side, as we discussed, but also increasingly companies are prescribing, particularly for public projects, how we build. One buzzword is BIM introduction, like Singapore requires BIM concepts, any project over $50 million in value. But we also see other changes. Industrialization, really, building more technology into things, as well as, offsite production and a more professional supply chain. We see lots of new materials coming in, especially with the Green Deal and the push for sustainability. We see digitalization of the products and the processes. We already heard digital twin, BIM technology, and what I think is extremely important, the classical incumbent industry is moving fairly slow. So we do see a huge number of new entrants. There's almost 15 billion of capital that flows into construction technology in a period of 5 years. Just last year alone, it was $5 billion. So we're expecting a lot of changes. We've identified 9 shifts, and I want to just touch very briefly on them, but it's important to understand that all these things are happening at the same time. This is not something that happens in sequence, but simultaneously. We already discussed, and we heard from Mr. Romberg, the product-based approach, particularly in real estate. We also see, obviously with that, companies going more into specialization. We don't have in the future the everything for everyone approach that this industry pretty much had in the past. We see much more value chain control and integration, things like collaborative contracting to get away from the suing and claiming in the industry that holds things up. We will very much build on what we call a common data environment, a technological base to work together more efficiently. We actually see quite a big wave of M&A, consolidation, customer centricity, really not saying we build and then we see who wants to use it, but much more aiming already at the customers when we design and build things. Investment technology and facilities, we touched on that. It's the technology of process improvements, but it's also the technology in facilities, how we build things, prefabrication, etc. Human resources. We need to reskill the whole workforce. Unfortunately, we're working in the least digitized industry in the world, and that needs to change. Otherwise, we won't be successful. But we also need to attract new talent. We need to attract different talent to this industry. We have to become more attractive. We do see internationalization. There are already global companies. To be frank, particularly a lot of large companies in construction, they're really more global with flags on the map, but not necessarily global in their processes. We will see global companies arising in this industry like we have in other industries. And then last but not least, but a super important topic is sustainability. To be honest, we get a call every week where somebody says, we have to move on sustainability. We need help because this industry has not really given it that much thought in the past. This chart is quite busy, but what we have done is we have actually modeled what will the value chain of the future look like if we see all these things that I've just outlined more coming into effect. And I know the chart is busy, so let me help you guide you through it a bit. It's an example of a fully productized value chain, which we typically have like in real estate, I think what we're talking about today. And what you see is that most parts of the value chain are going to be affected by major change. But let me point you to a few numbers that are relevant. In the line where it says value pools today, we have split the value added of each step in the value chain. And you see on the very right hand, this is the $11 trillion that we have seen before that make up the construction industry in total. Obviously, if you add up all the revenues of the participants, the number is much, much higher because we kind of resell in the value chain. So we have more than just the net value added that you see on this page. I think the other thing that's important is the profit pools. And if you actually put the 1,500 billion profits in total in this industry against the revenue cumulative, we see it's also a very unprofitable industry on average. The ROS is less than 5%. So what's going to be changing? We're going to see every step actually losing value, except for a major push into offsite construction. And that is a big move. You see, and I start a bit from the left, obviously you see a rise in software companies, but overall that's not the big major share of value. What we see is developers, designing and engineering companies, their value will decrease because some of what they do will be automated with systems like Mr. Ornbeck showed on Cree. We'll have much more reuse. That means we have to redo over and over the same tasks. And we have more standardization. And then you see on the very right hand, you see the biggest change in the general contractors. And here you see that a lot of the value that general contractors today deliver on site will be moved off site. That may still be captured by the general contractors if they build construction sites for modular buildings. Then they can capture this, but it will move to a new segment in the chain. And we will also get rid of all the inefficiency. Mr. Hornbeck showed the 14% waste on site, which is probably more real estate. If you look to other industries, we see numbers up to 30% waste because of the things, how we build things. So net, we're going to see a huge shift in value. We're going to see 20 to 30% of the total value chain shifting from one segment or from several segments to another, but also the efficiency gains, the 15 to 20%. Are huge. And just to highlight the order of magnitude of the value that can be captured by improving the value chain, we estimate this even in the next 15 years to somewhere between 250 and 300 billion US dollars, which is a huge number. And that is something that we should go after. So when we go into two topics that I would like to highlight, one is sustainability. And the other one is modular construction. On sustainability, I think we heard, if you look at the total life cycle, that first of all, 40% of our CO2 emissions in Europe are caused by real estate and construction. Now, we have to realize that only 25% of that is actually in the building itself and the construction process. Almost 80% is in operating and using our buildings. So we need to turn to both. On the new build, which is the processing of raw materials, which captures most of the CO2, so we'll look into that. The construction process itself is not huge, but it's still significant, something we need to look into. And then obviously we need to also make sure that we don't forget about all the construction that can take place in improving operating and making existing buildings better. We have to keep in mind by 2050, 80% of the buildings we will use are already existing, and we need to think about what to do with those. So I would like to also call to action to think about what we can do in refurbishment to push sustainability, like insulation, like better windows, like better technology, and things like that. The third element I'd like to point out on this page, this whole life cycle calculation does not yet include the decommissioning and potential reuse of materials. This is something that the industry has some experience in, but to be very honest, still very little experience in, not many numbers. We're actually working right now to build a complete picture and include this life cycle on the decommissioning and reuse side. And when you look into different materials, that may have a big impact on the materials we choose to work with. Just to show on the materials that I showed make up a big piece and the construction, it is interesting that more than 50% of a typical building today goes into the concrete and steel. And we all know that in the way we use concrete today, it's one of the most impactful on our environment. And that's why there is a big, big push away from concrete and steel toward other materials and also to new forms. There's also a lot of research going into making concrete more sustainable. So we're going to see a lot of changes, but you clearly see on this chart why that is happening. I would like to also point to the two light blue bars, the on-site emissions in construction as well as the transport, because if we move to modular, it will have a major impact on that. There will be almost zero on-site emissions because what you need to do is really just stack things. And transportation will be lower because you don't transport every single part to the site, but you transport big elements to the site, and that will be also a huge impact. What we do see is that obviously here we see a big trend toward modular and a huge trend toward using more woods by both the owners as well as the developers. Now, one thing that is important to us, when we talk about modular, modular can take many forms. And a lot of times what happens is when I talk about modular, people immediately think about the 3D volumetric modular that we have seen in Singapore. It's now getting broader. Many developments are going to full 3D. It has the advantage of having a finished product that you can ship to site and you just have to stack on top of each other, hook it up, and it's done. Modular, a 3D modular, makes a lot of sense for things like student housing, hotel rooms, because they are typically smaller and contained and super repetitive. You don't need as much flexibility. And when you look at the most modern hotel rooms, they're fully serviced and finished rooms, up to the light bulbs installed on site before they're shipped. And some of the shipments are quite far. So there's a Polish company making the hotels for the US and the UK. What we do see is that most likely we'll be moving more into a combination of 3D and what we call flat pack products, because in the end transport of a 3D thing is transporting a lot of empty air. On the flat pack products, right now we already see huge prefabrication on concrete components, etc. But if it's only precast, the value add is fairly low. And you really don't make a big difference in the value chain. You improve the quality slightly. The real value comes if you start to integrate the full units, including cabling, piping, etc., and then find ways to mount that on site. That's where the big value will come from. And then the transport, relative to the value of the product you're transporting, the transport cost will also go significantly down, which is a big impact on the overall cost calculation. When you look at what's the impact of modular, I would say today the biggest impact that we do see, and I think Mr. Holmberg showed some very, very impactful examples, is schedule compression. We typically see 20 to 50% compared to a normal project. And to be honest, we've seen more. But this is what we typically see. Cost reduction, right now, it's very interesting. Most providers say the cost is not really lower yet. However, we see potential, and this is also what industry reflects, of 20 and up to 40%. It really depends on how well we are able to standardize the products, which then enables much more automation in the plants, which we have very little of today, as well as higher utilization of the plants. That is a big hindrance today. So once we drive the industry toward becoming more modular in general, this will also enable us to be much more efficient. The other three dimensions we also see already: reliability on cost and schedule is something that people say are key drivers for the customer, the end user, to accept this. Obviously, we're much more able to build sustainable products into this because we can drive innovation much faster, and also maintainability and deconstruction will be a big advantage of modular construction. And then in the end, the quality of the manufactured product. If you can produce everything in a contained building rather than on a frosty site or an overheated site, the quality is much better. You will have the right tools in place, and you won't have as much, let me say, handicraft that is of lower quality on the sites if you go to a factory. Now, what are the prerequisites of going to modular? I think one big element, and we discussed, is regulatory alignment. This is super important if we have building codes that are different not only across countries or even states within some of our European countries, but even down to the cities. It is super difficult to get the standardization in place and really capture the benefits. Other elements are access to materials, access to the labor force, then also the quality perception. Unfortunately, modular buildings still have a bit of a negative touch sometimes from what we try to build and have built in a very cheap way in the 60s. Sometimes local site constraints, you have to transport, big elements to the sites, but you can solve that typically. And then the biggest element is scale and continuity of volumes. It's very interesting. We get a lot of inquiries from both construction companies as well as developers. And every time it's a question of how much volume can we guarantee, because that makes a big change in the overall business case. So what does that mean? I would like to share just a couple of numbers because you had asked me to say, what could it mean for our Lithuanian wood and construction industry? So let me just explain a model that we have created. And obviously, it's not a prediction, but really more how to think about it. You see on the left-hand side the breakdown of building construction expenditure in Europe, totally about 500 plus billion. And you see that much more than half, roughly 60% of that is in residential. So that's something we need to focus on. Also, if you look at the fit for modular construction, you see that residential buildings have a very good fit, as well as hotel rooms, obviously, or schools, because very repetitive elements. Now, what does that mean? Typically today, we see roughly 40 billion of modular building of all kinds. And to be very frank, there's a high variance on that number, depending on when you start counting things as modular versus conventional. Because if you only use precast slabs, it's usually counted already as modular, but you can discuss whether that's truly modular. But in any way, based on 40 billion of modular building market today in Europe, what we have done is to say, if modular increases, the overall market doesn't change very much in the next years, at least according to the current forecast, but the share of modular is increasing. Today's increase rate is roughly 4% CAGR. What we see is this is becoming much more looked after, and that's why we could well imagine that you also get this to 6 or 8% per year increase in modular of all the construction of buildings in Europe. But if we just assume that we stay on the 4% track, you see on the right-hand side that obviously not all buildings are wood. In single-family residential, most of it is wood today. I think it's 70 or 80%. If you go to multifamily, it's already much less. So again, the question in the future will be a bit, how much wood will we use? But if you think about the value that could be created, if you take the 4% increase in modular and say that 60% of all buildings that are built modular will be wood-based construction, then you're talking just in the value of the wood, roughly 5 to 7 billion in market value across Europe. But what I think is maybe the more relevant number, as I said, the real value comes from integrating and pre-fitting the modules or flat pack panels, if you want, not only 3D modules. And then the value, market size, could be 10 to 20 billion, which is obviously much, much more. And I think that's what we need to look at. Now, when we look at these numbers, what do they mean for us? This is as much a supply question as a demand question. Because obviously, when you talk to developers, they buy a piece of land and they want to build something to their specifications. They obviously need to be more flexible on exactly what they're specifying to make it fit to modular. But if they don't find someone who has the supply capacity and guarantees the timing of supply, then they will most likely shift to something else. So I think it is very important that we do invest smartly ahead of demand to make sure that when the demand is there, and I can just share that in the last couple of months in particular, the question or the demand for wooden modular construction from developers, both public and private, has just gone up so much more that I think there's a big piece. Maybe as a last slide and closing thought, I'd like to share a bit what we've done. We've done a questionnaire with about 400 executives from the industry to ask, how does our COVID situation change? Overall, the industry hasn't been affected so much. Construction sites have gone more or less undisturbed in many parts of the world, not everywhere. But there are still changes. And while everybody says the changes that I described in the beginning are there and they will happen, they see big acceleration, particularly in the integration of the value chain to reduce the inefficiency, reduce the complexity, as well as the investment in technology and facilities. Those are the biggest drivers. And on the right-hand side, you see that those are also the two dimensions where companies and the people we asked have already made additional investments since the start of the COVID pandemic. So with that, I hope I gave you some insights and some perspectives on the opportunities that are here. They're huge. And I think we need to move forward rapidly to capture them. And the question of where this is happening depends very much on the supply side to say that where do we offer the best products at the right price and at the right quality in a modular, hopefully wood-based construction way. Thank you very much.
Ačiū pranešėjui, ačiū ponui.
I thank the presenter. I thank Mr. Struber for very deep insights in his overview. Now we move forward. Production of wooden buildings can help us to solve climate change and the lack of affordable housing. We need an essential aspect is that forests should not be depleted as a result of that. Some experts says that when forests are used, some other forests should be planted instead. Mr. Albertas Kasparavičius is Deputy Director of the Lithuanian State Forest Service. He will be speaking about Lithuanian forest resources and the potential use in developing green economy. So the floor is yours. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you see me and you can hear me. First of all, thank you for the possibility to join you at this conference. My presentation will be different from the previous ones. It will cover Lithuanian forest resources and their potential in developing green economy. I will ask you a simple question. Can a green economy function without the contribution of forests? You would probably say no. Wood is and forest is a natural creation that can transform solar energy into biomass, absorb CO2. It can be regenerated and developed quite easily, whereas other human solutions are very often expensive and demand effort, energy, and resources and are not that effective. Tree growth is a natural process whose result can be widely used in green economy. Growing trees emit oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide. Trees store solar energy that can later on be used to produce energy. It is lightweight green resource. It has carbon locked inside of it. According to the Lithuanian legislation, forests need to be regenerated. And in Lithuania, those that want to buy forests and want to buy wood can be sure that forests will be replanted and regenerated and that this activity will not have a negative effect. I will show you different alternatives of using forests. On the left-hand side, you can see forests that are managed from the very planting to its very maturity. On the right-hand side, you can see forests as a one-time resource, an overused resource. We have a sustainable practice of use of forest resources. So what does that mean? And how should we understand that? In 1993, a European Conference of Ministers argued that maintenance and use by sustainably applying biological biodiversity and productivity, viability, regeneration capability to fulfill ecological, economic, and social functions in the future, in the region, in the country, and globally, without detriment to other ecosystems, is mean maintenance and use of forests in a sustainable way. So sustainable management of forests can fulfill different needs of construction, of household, and recreation. What is the characteristics of a Lithuanian forest? In Lithuania, we have 2.20 million hectares of forests, which is 33.7% of all the territory of Lithuania. One-third of all the accumulated forest resources can be found in mature forests. So on this slide, you can see the changes in different forest resources. If we take dead trees and shaft volume, we can see that it amounts to around 60 million cubic meters. In economic terms, it might be harmful because we suffer losses, but this is also the way to develop biodiversity. The majority of forests in Lithuania are pine, fir, birch, and other trees. And we have more or less equal distribution in state and private forests, and a lower number of trees in reserved forests. Forest growth actually is a very important factor to consider forest quality. One-fourth of all the forest gain is stored for future use, and the remaining part is used for producing different products. About 3 million cubic meters are lost and later on are recycled. According to sustainable forest economy criteria and indicators, forests are considered to be bad when the gain is less than 100. The regeneration is very low. If we compare the situation of Lithuania with other countries, we can see that we are much better than Germany, Switzerland, and Czech Republic, but a bit worse than Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and Poland. Lithuania has never in the history of its independence reached the level of deforestation. Lithuanian forests can be divided into different groups according to their management and economic activity. Group 1 and Group 2 are used for developing biodiversity. Group 3 and 4 allows for moderate economic activities. And the forests of Group 2 and 4 are the basis of a green economy. Sometimes we might ask ourselves whether intensive forestry is in line with climate mitigation objectives. Yes, if CO2 absorption is made by regeneration of forests, maintenance, management of forests, improving their quality and resilience. When timber is used for long-term products, by storing the locked carbon. And when wooden products are being recycled. Very often there are some urges to stop economic activity in the forests because it is argued that it is detrimental to the biodiversity. But actually the situation should not be seen as that. If we do not use forests for our economic activities, we move away from a green economy. The research shows that the effect of unmanaged forests to climate mitigation is much lower than that of managed forests. Practical examples in our country shows that forests that are heavily heavily managed actually have much more natural forest habitats than in unmanaged forests. So we can harmonize sustainable forestry, sustainable forest management with and the preservation of natural properties. In Lithuania, there are still around 200,000 hectares of forests that do not have their owners, and some of them are unused for 30 years. And 70% of those unowned forests are mature and they can be used for producing biofuel, and instead higher quality and more resilient forests could be reproduced or regenerated. We need legal regulation in order to ensure sustainable development of forests in Lithuania. we have a positive change of Lithuanian forest resources in the 21st century, and we are very happy about that. And we have great wood volume gains in Lithuania, which now amounts to 20 million cubic meters per year. We plan further wood volume gain and the growth of forest territory in our country. Now, in Lithuania, we have great conditions and opportunities for the use of wood and timber in our economy, and this is thanks to rational economic activities and application of rational and sustainable models. And this offers a huge potential for the future in Lithuania to satisfy the needs of wood and timber. But the contribution of Lithuanian forests to the green economy will very much depend on the new forestry policy. Because very often there is a question of whether forests should be used sustainably, and instead of that, the question is asked whether forests should be used at all for the production of timber. I believe that forests and timber can be used instead to reduce fossil fuel use. Thank you very much for your attention.
Labai ačiū už.
Thank you for the most comprehensive overview from which we can form the conclusion that timber resources in Lithuania are quite vast, and since our construction sector needs changes which can be influenced by using more timber in construction sector, the question arises, why shouldn't Lithuania use this opportunity? Well, next to me, I have Mr. Simonas Gentvilas, member of the Seimas, who formerly used to work as the chair of the Committee on Environment. He originates from Klaipėda, and he has some family ties with architecture. The person who can firmly tell us how Lithuania can become the hub of green production. Thank you so much. My mission today is to speak on behalf of the Committee on Environment of the Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania. When we speak about the ambition of the European Green Deal, we see some kind of a conflict here. Because when we speak about some restrictions, we have in mind huge funds that are needed for transformation process. We have heard a lot about climate goals and whether Europe should go further, and instead of 40% ambition, it should raise the goal of 55% decrease up to the year 2030, which will require a lot of effort. We have specific fields where we speak about biomass, for example. something that our president was telling about in New York, speaking about Lithuania's breakthrough. We heard from our mayor, from the commissioner, Virginijus Sinkevičius already, and the conclusion is probably that we need leadership from the public sector, because we do have initiatives already in place, but everything depends on whether we are just the exporters of innovation. As for the construction sector, which has a long-lived tradition in this country, we have to think, how are we going to export more know-how, how we are going to make our construction greener and attract innovations to the sector. Sustainable green construction is one of the goals that we should probably pursue. As the Commissioner Sinkevičius mentioned, Europe has ambitious goals, as Ursula von der Leyen mentioned, that construction should be changed immensely through digitization and other means, making buildings more sustainable. However, looking at the experience and commitments of different countries, we see that leadership is something that different countries are undertaking. Let's say this is the picture of the Olympic Stadium in Paris in 2024, where 70% of structures would be built out of wood. The President of France raised the ambition that public houses in 2022 will be constructed from more organic materials, pushing away concrete and steel out of construction sector. Coming back to Lithuania and the ambition to ensure that in 2024 all public buildings in the country will have at least 50% of wood or organic materials produced from biomass. France has a goal to achieve this in 2022. This is why I don't believe this is an extremely ambitious goal for our country. Why is it so important to have public leadership? I believe that the state is one of the biggest customers, particularly when we speak about huge buildings. And without the flag raised by the government, we cannot expect our businessmen to follow these goals. I believe we have to join forces, organizers of this conference, in pursuing this ambition, because we hear that our construction sector is interested in conducting pilot projects so that we can boast about the skyscrapers constructed here in Lithuania. So the state ambition is obligatory, and here we need at least three things, three commitments. A big ambition is being repeated on the European level about a more ambitious goal in climate change field. I think Lithuania has to take a commitment, a higher commitment now, and to rethink which sectors can be the ones where we can expect a breakthrough. And I believe that the construction sector is one of these. As the mayor of the city mentioned, we also need major changes, major shifts in our regulation. This is because the basic regulations were adopted back in Soviet times, and today they are a hindrance for innovations. We are exporting timber to other European countries for the construction which would not be allowed in our own country. Number 3 is encouragement of innovations. We need to educate engineers who would be innovators in construction sector. Even today, we have the industry that manufactures products for other European countries, and I believe that this is the field where we can have a win-win situation in the future. How to achieve that? I believe that we have to put together guidelines, and we have actually put together a resolution of this event, and I do believe that some of these statements and ideas may go to the action plan for the new government. We have to state that the construction sector is one of the sectors related to huge amounts of CO2 emissions. We also understand that we have industry where local materials can be used. We have big opportunities, and we have identified 8 main steps that might get into the action plan and the program of our government as to how we could proceed to encourage the use of wooden materials. First of all, it's the change of methodology. Today, we don't often calculate the amount of emissions in the construction process and what impact it has on the climate, focusing on bigger projects. However, the society representatives are not well aware of these huge standards. There are also standards for new construction, that A+ class buildings, but I think we need to take a broader approach and think about the construction materials, among other things, and the methodology has to be integral here. We have to update the norms of regulation of construction. As I mentioned, Lithuanian manufacturers are exporting prefabricated structures to other European countries because here we have stricter requirements compared to the countries where our production goes to. We have to speak that the state dictates conditions for major projects. About 70% of public procurement funds actually are allocated to public buildings, starting from swimming pools to, let's say, bridges and things like that. This is why Lithuania is able to undertake the commitment similar to what France has done to ensure that 50% of materials in our buildings entail organic materials. Lithuania has to become an exporter of technology, not just prefabricated structures. Our engineering companies are consulting many entrepreneurs and engineers, as well as designers, in other East European countries today. The question is, who is going to be the first in providing new services? It is very important to take the commitment, and it is key that we train new, high-qualified construction specialists, engineers, and the green construction may be a new IT export of Lithuania. It is very important to speak about the following, that in the near future, when dealing with regulatory mechanisms, we are going to make big investments in the near future. We are going to have very big tenders this year, and already today we have to have very specific plans as how the European funds are going to be used. It goes without saying that Lithuania will have to borrow funds for economic revival, and the amount of investments in the future later will decrease. In 2024, when we will have a lower scale. I'll leave you at that. Thank you so much for being together today. And I am hopeful that this does not remain as just a mere ambition of the Parliament, but that it is also the ambition of the partners' construction sector, so that we can join forces and move forward together. Because in the environmental field, the European Green Deal is often understood as a duty. Let's not miss out the opportunity, as our mayor has said today, because we are speaking about promotion of Europe as a whole and Lithuania as a country. Its engineering and construction industry. I encourage everyone not to miss the opportunity, and I hope that we will manage to achieve success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gentvilas, for this thorough overview and the action plan or roadmap Please don't leave us. We have several questions from our audience that are not dedicated to specific speakers, but these are related to Lithuanian developments. So I will ask those questions to you, and I invite other speakers to contribute if they're willing to. Donata Armakauskaitė asks a question. Sustainability in construction is not only related to the construction of new buildings, but also with the restoration of historical buildings. Will you focus on the restoration of those buildings and preservation of heritage and renovation of new buildings? Well, this is a very correct question. As an urbanist, I go for brownfield rather than greenfield investment, or the investment into the existing urban possibilities. 2% of Lithuanian construction works are related to reconstruction or restoration. The European Union is working on the renovation wave strategy to achieve 30% of in reconstruction for the reconstruction, which means that we have to reconstruct our cities to improve their living conditions, to improve working conditions in offices. We need to restore, renovate the buildings so that they are energy efficient. So the message that we receive from the European Union is that we will move to renovation and restoration. And this is a very complex challenge because reconstruction in Lithuania has the same tasks as the new construction, and therefore some buildings are unmanaged because the same standards are applied to renovation as to construction. Therefore, regulations need to be reviewed in order to ensure that reconstruction or renovation becomes more popular. Actually, historical buildings have their own style, but when we speak about conversions of unmanaged territories, and I see that here we have a chance. Thank you. Anybody else willing to speak about on how specifically wooden constructions and innovative components could help renovation of buildings, renewal of buildings, or even development of buildings so that they can be used again? We will have to move from words to actions in order to answer this question. Another question. In tender rules for schools and other public buildings, concrete and steel is the main requirement, and wood is not mentioned in those tender rules. So actually this is, well, we saw from the presentation of McKinsey representative that 57% of all emissions are produced by concrete and steel, both in producing and using it. Therefore, concrete and steel has to be made, has to be replaced by wooden structures. We are facing a huge challenge here in Europe. We need to use the available funds, and for that we need to change Lithuanian regulations on constructions if we want to be successful, and we need to introduce new alternatives for concrete and steel, for example, wood. One more question. Professor Antanas Šapalas. Would it be possible to use the green funds to compensate the constructors and producers their choice of ecological and organic elements in construction? Well, certainly we need to speak about the qualifications of the contractors and the contracting parties. The European Commission has only started the renovation wave strategy. It is not clear how the taxation part will look like, but I believe that a different standard will be set, and it will be underpinned by financial motivation too. Now, several questions from Algirdas Gižutis. Is there any ways that the European Union is going to promote sustainable use of forest resources? And question number 2. Will we satisfy our needs by using European forests, or will we be forced to import wood from third countries? Well, actually, this is a question to the European Commission. We have to find a clear balance in terms of supply of wood from the state forests and the reserved forests or forests in reservations. And I believe that we will find the solution on forests in the upcoming 6 months. It is important to preserve forests that cannot be regenerated and that have to be preserved. Only 22% of European biodiversity is safe, and other resources are critical, and therefore we need to clearly define that our progress is not made at the cost of using vulnerable resources that cannot be regenerated. There are no further questions. I would like to thank everybody for joining our forum. I hope that it gave much food for thought and it was inspiring. I would like to ask Mr. Raimondas Beinortas, the head of the innovation cluster, to make some concluding remarks. So the floor is yours, Mr. Raimondas Beinortas. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that this conference should become the catalyst for further development and movement. The main aim of this conference was to stimulate discussion so that we could solve the difficulties and eliminate the limitations or hurdles so that we can become innovative in terms of wooden products in wooden environments. At the end of our forum, I would like to sincerely thank Virginijus Sinkevičius, member of the European Commission, Mayor of the Vilnius City, Remigijus Šimašius, Mr. Albertas Kasperavičius, Deputy Director of the Lithuanian State Forest Service. I would like to convey my best wishes for the entire service. I would like to thank a member of the Seimas, Simonas Gentvilas. I thank for his presentation. And I thank the organizers for making this conference a true success.
Rube, gentlemen, thank you very much for fascinating and very useful presentation. Thank you very much. Baigdamas dar norėčiau vieną kitą pastebėjimą padaryti.
As we know now, alongside other issues, the budget for the next year is being considered in our parliament. So this is the main document which will decide on our future. If we compare ourselves to Canada, Norway, and Singapore, our quality and level of life is lagging behind. But the main thing is that if we look at the structure of our budget, we don't earn that amount of money in order to ensure even the present day level of living. And therefore, we are facing the challenge that we have to achieve the level of earning the money to ensure normal way of living. But this is on the one hand. On the other hand, we are facing the situation that without efforts, we know very well what can happen to our homes and our planet. We should understand in all the possible ways and see that we have to look for the balance between saving our planet and moving forward to earn our living. So thank you very much for all the guests. I thank the organizers for this conference, and I hope that this will be our first but not the last time to discuss similar matters. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the partners of our forum, Vilnius Technological University, Kaunas Technological University, Vytautas Magnus University, Vilnius Academy of Arts, Vilnius Union of Architects, Architects Chamber, Association of Design Entities in Lithuania, Lithuanian Confederation of Industrialists, and Prefab LT Cluster. Thank you very much. I hope for further cooperation, and I hope that this forum will give a strong impetus for fruitful developments in the future. Thank you.